When I think of my nostalgia for Octopath Traveler 1, I remember an impressive game with cool gameplay and visuals that brought a new spin on a formula I had seen many times before. However, I also recall having a large issue with the way the story of the game was structured, and that heavily influenced my feelings on the game, to a point where I recognized it as a well-made game, but didn't like it because of that structure. And after rewatching my playthrough, I've decided to place it ahead of Mario + Rabbids Kingdom Battle. Here's why. While playing through the game, it was clear I was experiencing a game that had been doing some cool things. Having multiple characters that could be played across multiple stories was something I hadn't yet experienced and was a fresh idea. On top of that, I found myself pulled into the visuals of the game, and the music kept me interested all the way through. I really latched on to the combat and its unique style of weakness execution. It effectively turned each fight into a small puzzle that I gravitated to the systems a lot. I liked the variety of options and the customization I was able to utilize, to the point where I could craft the team I felt fitting for my playstyle. I even found optional bosses that awarded new subclasses that added even more to the customization options. However, despite having a lot of fun with the systems, gameplay, visuals, music, and even the individual stories, one thing really heavily weighed on my playthrough, to the point where I made a separate video in the Let's Play to explain it, and that issue was the game's story structure. For reasons I did not understand, the game was built so that you needed to do all Chapter 1s for the 8 characters before being able to move on to Chapter 2. From there, you would do all Chapter 2 stories and then move on to Chapter 3 and so on. While there is flexibility here, in that after some time, you have the availability to change up that order, it's very clearly the intended way to play the game. This was something I couldn't wrap my head around, because it didn't make any sense to me that we couldn't play the stories from start to completion before moving on to the next. Each story doesn't even incorporate the other characters, so it was just all the more confusing. In my thoughts of the game, I echoed my sentiments of the story and ultimately came to the conclusion that I didn't like the game because of it. Despite having so many wonderful elements to it, I couldn't find enjoyment in experiencing the story the way it was intended to be, and that sapped away at the fun I was having. For the rewatch, it was easier to be sympathetic to the structure of the story, but I still found myself not enjoying it how it was implemented. I had sectioned off the videos by character and chapter, so while I did not watch in this manner, I had the capabilities to watch them in the way I would have felt to be the best method. Still, it was undeniable that the gameplay and even the stories of Octopath Traveler 1 really do a good job. There's variety in both areas, and with enough time, you're bound to find something to latch onto. Random encounters all felt like they had weight to them, and navigation through areas felt pretty solid. Bosses elevated the puzzle-like nature of the combat to new heights, forcing adaptation or complete changes in strategies. Despite only having one death across story encounters, every boss had some degree of lethality to them, and there were certainly some nail-biters. The stories are likely where it wavers the most, yet still achieving success. Many stories like Ophelia, Tressa, Alphen, and Therian's didn't necessarily hit the mark. In fact, in cases such as Tressa and Alphen, you interacted with characters who not only received more backstory than the main counterpart, but were far more interesting characters in general. For Tressa, both Ollie and Leon would have been clear-cut winners, who make Tressa seem mundane and boring in comparison. Meanwhile, Alphen meets Ogun, who is one of the most insightful and fascinating people that any of the main characters interact with. Being able to experience his story instead of Alphen's would have been so much of an upgrade. Based on memory, I ranked Octopath Traveler 1 at 63 out of 117, and it presents such a weird angle to consider. The major pillars of the game all stand tall and keep me invested in those aspects. The gameplay has variety between the characters, which is then elevated by various equipables, spells, classes, and path actions. There's a bit of excitement when seeing a really nice weapon on an NPC that is too expensive for Tressa, but easy to steal with Therian. The quality in stories typically missed the mark with the exception of Cyrus, but Olberic and Primrose were still solid. So it begs the question on how much I really value the structure of a story and how that interacts with its competitors. If I didn't like the game because of its structure, but everything else I've acknowledged to be right up my alley, does that make the game sit higher or lower on the list? I think what I can say is that I feel this game excels at its gameplay, and because the structure of the story is an extension of that story itself, the story then falters if the content of them generally succeeds. So, I think that means Octopath Traveler 1 comes ahead of Mario + Rabbids Kingdom Battle. It contains some very memorable elements to the game, and its gameplay kept me invested enough to continue playing it despite my lack of enjoyment. And even though its story structure is the weakest link to the point where it drained at my ability to like it, the fact is the game was fun to play. That's enough to slot it ahead of Mario + Rabbids Kingdom Battle, which didn't have much of a story to care about.